go to Lease Administration, Leases, Add Lease. I'm going to put in my property ID. And then I'm going to put in my lease name. We are asking that you put both the legal name per the lease and the DBA name on the same field, because this enables you to search by the DBA name when you're searching in other windows. This DBA field is not searchable. So for example, when you're entering a receipt, very often the check will come from the tenant with their DBA name on it, and this way you'll be able to search for that tenant much more easily than if you just put the DBA name in the DBA field. We do recommend, although we cannot require, that you also put the DBA name in the DBA field. There are some reports that you can run showing the DBA name, and so that's really helpful to have that there as well. As far as lease types, please keep in mind the reason these are named the way they are is to keep the triple net lease at the top. Most of your leases are triple net leases. The other lease types are really for special cases. If you truly think your lease type is not triple net, please discuss with your asset manager. Obviously, a governmental office would fall under a governmental location. We called it office so that it fell below triple net, just so that triple net is the top selection. So basically, if your lease has caps, it's still triple net. If it has gross ups, it's still triple net. Things that aren't triple net are a lease that only recovers taxes, a lease that has a base year. So not a base cap, but a base year. So we only recover the amounts over the base year. Those are examples of leases that are not triple net. But anything where the starting point is all possible recoveries, and then we have restrictions on that, like caps or gross ups help reach the total, is still a triple net lease. So please select triple net unless you are confident it is not a triple net. Then it's going to open up the sales category. So really, we have a limited number of sales categories. They're technically all the same. This is informational so that when we run a tenancy schedule, we can see what kind of sales reporting is applicable for this lease. So for example, the first one is no percent rent. There's no percent rent or anything, no reporting, nothing on the lease. There's also sales, that's standard percent rent. They pay some sort of percent rent. And then there's sales reporting. They have sales reporting, but there's no percent rent. All of your leases by default will be loaded with this sales reporting required, but no percent rent. One of the first items we'll ask you to do once you onboard is to go and update these to either change it if there is no sales reporting and no percent rent to no percent rent, or if there is also percent rent to sales. Once you've populated those items, you just hit save. Now, the next these items should not be applicable at this time. So we're just going to hit save and continue. Now, if you would like to update the late fees, if they're different from standard, you can drill into the name and come and update the late fees. We do have a document covering exactly how to set up late fees. I'm not going to cover that right now. If it's standard late fees, such as we have set up at the property level, you do not have to do anything. This will pull in from the property level. And at the property level, we have 5%, 5 days, because I was told by the asset managers that usually it's 3 business days. Yardi does not accommodate 3 business days. So we just set it up as 5 days to account for weekends, 5%, 5 days. And the other thing to be aware of is that all the all the GL accounts are flagged for late fees. There are no late fees on late fees. So if a tenant gets charged a late fee and that's the only item sitting open, it won't calculate late fees on top of that. And it has a minimum of a penny. That is just to accommodate to net out items. So if they have a negative charge or they have a prepaid, it's technically going to calculate the late fee on that and then net it against any charge late fees. And so if the net effect is negative, it won't calculate a late fee. You can populate the general information if you are interested. As you can see, I haven't set any of this up because it's non-reportable. If there's particular information information you would like to be able to track related to a tenant, I'm happy to assign these to this, but currently I don't because none of this is reportable. Contacts are required to activate a lease. So do make sure you add a contact. We will be showing you how to use correspondence later. And eventually, all of the properties will have commercial cafe available to them. So getting those emails set up is going to be really important. If you know an existing contact, perhaps related to another lease, you can click on contact and find the correct contact. But otherwise, just click new and then enter their information. The blue field is required. It says last name. Most of the time I see people just enter the full name in the last name field, but that's entirely up to you. The remaining fields, I do recommend for your primary contact, you put the address unless it is the same as the property address. If you later issue a refund, it's going to start by looking at this record for the refund address. Notice it auto codes this code. You do not need to type anything there. Be sure to leave that blank. And we're going to select as the lease billing and primary, save and close. So now we're going to add terms to this lease. The description field is where you're going to populate more information than Yardi will accommodate. Basically, you need to remember that when all your properties are onboarded, almost all of them are going to have what is considered the original lease in place. So it's going to appear as though it's the First Amendment. And obviously, in many cases, it's not the First Amendment. It may be the Third or Fourth or Fifth Amendment. This is the field in which you can clarify what that information is. So you could put it that it's the Fourth Amendment here. So that if you look at this, you'll be able to see that. Contracted area is not necessary to be updated because it will pull in from your unit. The lease start date is the actual lease start date. The possession date, you are welcome to populate. As you can see, it's not required, and I do not believe that currently the asset managers have any requirements around possession date. You can either populate the lease expiration or the term. Yardi will update the other field based on that. The term is always going to be in whole months. So if you believe a lease starts or ends in a partial month, it's not going to say 60.5. It's going to still say the round number. The other thing to keep in mind is talking with the asset managers, they believe all of their leases end at the end of the month. So again, if you are entering a lease that you believe ends in the middle of the month, confirm with them prior to activating the lease. The lease sign date is optional. It's helpful information, but not required. And the holdover percentage can be entered here per the lease. Notes field is just a free-form field in which you can put any notes. Any lease can be a month-to-month lease. So a renewal can be a month-to-month. A new lease can be a month-to-month. Any lease can be a month-to-month, and all you have to do is check this box, and then it removes the requirement for the term and the lease expiration. But once you've populated this, you're just going to hit save. The beautiful thing that Yardi does is it tries to walk you through the screens one by one. It doesn't overwhelm you, so you don't have to navigate and figure out what needs to be done next. It's only going to release the appropriate information. So we're going to hit save. Now we need to add the units. I do need to mention that the units is one of the few things that we cannot correct after activation. So if it's an original amendment, we can put it back in process and attach a lease. But if it's an expansion and someone forgot to activate the unit and then, forgot to add the unit and then activated the lease, that would take Yardi's intervention and or a modification. I really try and avoid using modifications. They cause lots of problems. So you'll find that I don't do training on modifications. If for some reason we really believe that the correct solution for a situation, such as during COVID, is a modification, I'll do a separate training on that. So I'm going to hit new so that I can attach a unit and select the correct unit. So now you can see it's updated or contracted area based on the area of the unit. Next is rent. I'm going to hit new to enter my rent schedule. Type in the field. This lease only has one unit. The populating the unit field is never required. You do not need to enter the unit. It will automatically assume that this rent schedule is associated with all units on the lease. If you have multiple units and for some reason the rent is defined for each unit separately, then you can populate this unit and add multiple rent schedules, but it is not necessary. So we're not going to add that. If you have sales taxes on all your charges, this is where you would enter the sales tax code and the rent percentage. This days due field actually changes the date that a charge is due in the system. So typically you're not going to use this. Again, this was actually a field that we used very commonly during COVID so that we could bill the charge and the credit in the same period, but the repayment by the tenant wasn't due until 3 months or 6 months or whatever the agreement term was. So typically don't populate this or it's actually going to change the dates that your charges appear on your AR report. So be very mindful of that. Now, if your lease defines the steps based on a percentage and the starting amount, you can absolutely use this. So for example, if my starting base is 1,000, and it's a step every 12 months, and the first step is in oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, we're in December, I forgot. And it's a 2% increase. Then I can populate that and hit save, and it will update the steps. I then can come in and override these and say, oh, well, they've rounded it up to 150 here and 160 here or whatever, and hit save and close. Okay. Now, if I want to add free rent, then I need to add another charge schedule and type in free. The only way that Yardi doesn't know any difference between free rent and base rent. They're just both rent charges. So we could have multiple rent charges for different types of rent. But the way we tell it that it's free rent is by saying that it's negative. And then we're going to say they get 3 months of free rent. So that would be, it would end 03/01/24. I don't recommend that you hard code the dates up here. This can make updating charge schedules later more difficult, and you can actually run into a hard error. For example, we would encourage you to start entering a lease the moment that you have the basic information regarding the lease, even if it's not fully executed, even if the TI isn't completed, even if the lease start date is somewhat unknown. If you go ahead and enter it, then you'll be able to modify these things later. But if, for example, you said this lease was going to start in December, and then you hard coded here that the charge schedule end date was 02/28/24, and then hit save, and then for some reason, this lease didn't actually end up starting until March 1st of 2024, it's going to give you an error and you're going to have to go and change all these dates. Whereas if you leave it to the default date, it will auto update most of your dates. Not all of them, some of them you'll still have to manually update, but most of them it will. Recovery estimates. Regardless of whether or not a tenant is paying recoveries in the first year or the first few months or whenever, you must attach recovery estimates to the lease in order to be able to update the recovery estimates whenever a tenant is going to start paying recoveries. So I'm just going to go ahead and attach the recovery charges, but I'm just going to click save and close. The other thing to keep in mind, traditionally, I have the proration set to annually because of recovery calculation problems I've had historically. Yardi has assured me that we've loaded packages that should prevent that from being a problem. So right now, the proration is going to default to monthly. If I feel that I need to change that in future based on recovery calculations, once I'm actually able to see some, then I'll let you know. And you'll just need to remember to update the proration to the correct proration calculation. Remember to never prorate these numbers. Yardi will prorate the charges based on the lease start date. This is always a full month amount. This does calculate prorations in multiple ways. Monthly is obviously taking the monthly amount divided by the number of days in the month times the number of days they're in the space. Annually calculates their annual rent amount divided by the number of days in the year times the number of days in the space. Period is going to match whatever this is. So if you're calculating it monthly, it's going to match your monthly calculations. None means regardless of when they move in the space, it's going to charge them 100% rent. And the monthly 30 days treats every single month as though it has 30 days. So it would take your monthly amount divided by 30 times the number of days in the space. So I'm just going to save and close and then add tax and insurance. If there are miscellaneous charges such as parking, that's where they would go, is here on this miscellaneous tab. If you happen to have anything where the charges will change based on something else, not based on another amendment, let me know. We can discuss how to set those up. The recovery tab is where you set up the actual recoveries. All the properties have a basic triple net setting set up. So when you hit new, you can just select CAM and save. And this just has very basic triple net charges. We'll go over recovery updates in more detail on Friday. So I'm not really going to go through that here. I'm just going to attach the pools. But even on Friday, I'm going to try and hit the high points and not spend a whole ton of time. It will all make much more sense once we go through some calculations. If you need to add another recovery group, such as maybe utilities, you would just click new recovery group and set that up here. You do have to have an associated charge code for you to be able to update those charges in future. Retail is where the percent rent settings are. All of your leases will come in with retail settings that will not actually calculate anything. There will be no percentages defined. That's so that they appear in some reports. So if a tenant has reporting requirements, even if they don't have percent rent, you do have to set up retail settings. So we're just going to set up some 0 item stuff. This tells it how often a tenant has to report. This is just helpful for us so that we can see, oh, because typically the asset managers want to see estimates monthly so they can do some calculations on that. But the tenant may not have to report anything other than annually or quarterly. And the problem is if you change the actual setting in Yardi to annual reporting, then it will only give you one field. You aren't able to estimate out the monthly reports. Once we onboard Commercial Cafe, we may have to have a discussion for tenants who are reporting sales through Commercial Cafe to change this, or if we can just verbally make sure the tenant knows that we're aware they're not actually required to report anything other than annually, but we'll have a conversation about that separately. So if, for example, they only had to report annually, I'd select reporting annually and then hit save and close because we're going to assume that they only have to report. We're not actually going to be setting up any calculations. Next is clauses. On the clauses, typically what we would like are all of the clauses that we have deemed important added. You can optionally add other clauses, but in addition, it isn't necessary for there to be any interpretation of what the meaning of the clauses is. If you have a legible PDF of the lease, literally just copy and paste from the lease. When you click add, there will be all of these different options. Just select all and click OK, and then go through and update them. When you open up each one, there's some helpful information provided. And typically what I do is I make sure and update this reference field. And so even if the lease is silent, I'll put NA in the reference field. And that way I can quickly see which ones of these I've already updated. Please be aware if there is an option, it will say option required. And so we do want the clause entered, even regardless of anything else. We need that clause entered so that you can attach it to the option. But when you drill into them, we've tried to enter some helpful information that will help you locate the correct clause in the lease if it's applicable. So we have terms to look for, we have particular questions that a lease might answer regarding this item, we have a definition, and then we have an example of the lease. This information should just be deleted out. If there is, for example, no clause for this, you would just put, in this field, you would put lease is silent or something similar. And then in the reference field, I put NA, like I say, that's optional, but it's helpful because if you get interrupted and come back, then once that's populated, you can see where you left off. Otherwise, as I said, we don't expect you to do any interpretation. You can literally just copy and paste the information directly from the lease. We have some internal sources of options and clauses. So whenever possible, I have populated that information for you. It isn't always complete because very often the sources I got it from would just say, for example, 3 renewal options. Well, when I'm trying to do that in mass, it's only one line. So you will have one line that says 3 renewal options and one option that says 3 renewal options. We will ask that you update those so that it's 3 different options with the correct date, assuming they're all still in force, obviously. So basically, you would just go through and update these according to the lease, copying and pasting the information from the actual lease. There is one called Other. This is just a catch-all. It has some definitions of what might be included in an other clause. Obviously, this one, if it's not applicable or you don't need it for anything else that you feel is important, you can just delete that one. And so you just click the delete button. Next is options. If a tenant does not have any options, the standard options are contraction, expansion, renewal, right of first offer, right of first refusal, and termination. If your tenant has none of these, we have a few custom ones, in which case you would select custom. The custom options are co-tenancy, terms in the lease, the right to go dark or dim, and relocation. If they have none of these options, then we do ask that you populate the option that says they have no options. This is just so that it's very clear to us on the tenancy schedule and on other reports that we're running and sending to our internal systems that there are no options. So the expiration of the option would be the expiration of the lease. You will have whatever internal process you have for reviewing and activating leases. I am currently logged in as a property manager. So the current process is that a property manager or someone on the property management team, we have other users that can enter leases, AR users, assistant property manager users, enter the lease, but only right now, property managers can ready a lease. Once all the properties are onboarded, it is the plan that asset managers will do the lease ready step. So the property teams will enter it. Asset managers will not have access to do any entering of leasing or modification of leases. They would have to send those back for corrections, but asset managers would log in, review the lease, and then ready it. So you would want to issue the report, send the PDF report to the asset manager so that they then know that it's ready for them to go out and update. Okay, one of the items that apparently I didn't get set up in training, that's, hold on, let me check. I thought I did. But apparently not. We are going to be using the NAICS codes. Sorry, I didn't catch this before. I guess I've just been importing things too much and hadn't actually drilled in. So it is expected that the asset managers will be updating that. Obviously, until all the properties are onboarded, we'll ask you to take a look at that and do your best to populate that. And then if the correct code isn't present, let me know, because I am only adding the codes that are currently represented by existing leases. Otherwise, it just gets too overwhelming. There's just far too much information out there, and it's too difficult to find the code that you need.
Okay, the NAICS codes should be present now, so you can just click on the hyperlink and then search for the appropriate code. If you don't find the appropriate code, then please send us an email to request it. Just as a note, if you're not sure what the appropriate code is, for many national chains, you can just Google 6-digit NAICS code for, let me see, Subway. So there you go. That tells you what the code is. If it's a more local code, you can put in a better description of exactly what it is, and you'll usually get the right code, and then you can go and see. So if this is 722513, if I go back into Yardi, I can type in 722, and there it is. Okay.